Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D. And we've just finished recording what I think is the best podcast we've recorded this year so far. It's certainly the most important one. If you're only going to listen to one of our podcasts this year or share one of our podcasts this year, I think this is the one. The lessons that we share in this episode are vital to understand.
Welcome to the Property Podcast. This is the show where we take a little bit of time out from advising a multi-million pound property fund, which you can learn about at portfolio.co.uk, and putting together hundreds of transactions a year for our clients. And we bring you some of the knowledge we've gained along the way for free. In this episode, we're going to help you take that knowledge and apply it to change your financial life. We're going to give you a tool to help you do it. We're going to explain that it's really not that hard. And we're going to give you plenty of motivation for going on that journey. So do make sure you keep listening.
So we're a bit spoiled for choice when it comes to news stories because so much is happening in the world right now. We've just had a budget and nothing was groundbreaking there, which is actually a good thing when it comes to a budget. But there are some interesting discussion points. So we're going to cover that in our next market update, which isn't too far away now. But for me, Rob, the big story is the banks, because we've seen a couple of banks in America collapse. At the time of recording, UBS had bailed out Credit Suisse, which was warmly received. Hopefully, by the time this goes out, that did happen and the bank was saved. But all of this has an impact, and impact in different ways. And one of the impacts that we've seen, Rob, is a little bit surprising because people may not expect this, but swap rates have fallen off the back of this volatility. So swap rates have fallen by 0.4%. So, Rob, before we get into the news story, let's give people a quick reminder of what are swap rates and why are they actually important? Why, as property investors, do we care?
So swap rates are an important factor in determining the cost of fixed rate mortgages. Because if you take out a variable rate loan, then every time the Bank of England's base rate changes, the lender can change the rate. And so they're not exposed to any risk there. You're exposed to the risk. When you take out a fixed rate, there's the lender that will be taking on the risk of rates changing in the future. But what they actually do is go and pass off that risk to someone else using the swap market, which is why swap rates determine effectively banks' cost of funding when they're making fixed rate loans to you. And the reason rates are falling now is that there's now perhaps a waning belief that interest rates are going to go as high as was previously thought. So again, if you're taking out a 5-year fixed rate loan, then if the markets believe that interest rates are going to go up significantly at some point during that 5 years, that's going to be priced into the rate that you're offered today. But because of the bank collapses in the US, markets now seem to believe that interest rates aren't going to go as high and may even start coming down a lot earlier than was previously thought. And the very simple reason for that is that the Federal Reserve in the US was basically minded to keep hiking rates up until something broke. And now something's broken and things are breaking all over the place. And so the belief is they're either not going to go much further and might even start coming back in the other direction because raising rates as fast as they have has caused so many issues. So by the time this episode airs, we'll know what the Federal Reserve has done because they're meeting on Tuesday or Wednesday, I believe. The Bank of England's next rate-setting meeting is on Thursday. So a few hours after this episode airs, we'll know what the Bank of England is doing. But again, because all this is forward-looking and based on expectations, it means that mortgage rates have already come down. And depending on what happens in those rate-setting meetings this week, they may come down further or they may go back up a bit, depending on the decisions and the tone that's coming out of the central banks.
So this is why I love doing this podcast, Rob, because you hear the headlines, the news of banks in trouble, and it sounds scary. And it is a bit scary. It's not to say this is a good thing, but you wouldn't automatically think or assume that, at least my mortgages are going to improve. Your mind wouldn't leap there. It just wouldn't happen. So it's useful that we can get into the detail of these stories. Of course, banks failing is not good news, but understanding that an unintended consequence is that mortgage rates look set to improve off the back of it is obviously useful information. And this is the type of stuff we'll get into more when we do our next market update. Of course, mortgage rates look like they're improving today. As Rob's already highlighted, by the announcements going out this week, it may change again. So that's why we cover the news every week on the podcast and then really deep dive with each market update. So make sure you join us for that one. It's going to be a biggie. Another biggie, Rob, is we're on a bit of a run with the podcast at the moment. So last week we celebrated our 10-year anniversary on the pod. Thank you so much to everyone who left us lovely messages off the back of that, by the way, you legends. This week, we're celebrating your book launch, which is just absolutely epic, the fact that it's being launched with Penguin Books. And next week, we've got another mammoth podcast. It's as big as these two. It's a triple whammy. We may be 10 years in, but we're not slowing down. In fact, we're ramping things up. So you've got a great episode today. Last week's episode was awesome. I hope you listened to that. But make sure you join us next week because we've got a super big announcement to make.
I honestly believe that understanding how money works can transform your life. I believed that before, but after spending 3 years writing my book, The Price of Money, which we'll talk about more a little bit later on, I could not be more convinced. Because in writing the book, I've become aware of so many things that you just don't hear about in the media, and that I think a lot of politicians would rather you didn't know. But when you do understand them, it just opens your eyes and it enables you to make such better decisions. So in this episode, we're going to talk about 3 ways in which understanding how the world of money works can transform your life. But Rob, before we get into that, I think it's important to talk about why now is such an important time to get to grips with this topic if you haven't already. Because obviously we had the crisis and the crash of 2008, and that took a while to play out. But after that, although there's been lots of kind of political events going on, in terms of investing, it's been fairly plain sailing. Anything that you could have invested in, pretty much, would have done all right, whether it's shares or bonds or property or anything, because there's been this huge tailwind of interest rates falling. But now, over just the last year, we've had this real turning point. Clearly, rates have gone up. And while we're not saying they're going to go up loads further, clearly we're not going back to effectively free money like we've had for the last 15 years or so. We've been seeing it everywhere in the news. Things that have been working are just not working anymore. We've seen the collapse in the share price of the companies that have done the best over the last few years. We've seen the collapse of banks in the US over just the last week. This does feel to me, Rob, like a turning point where lots of things are changing, lots of weird things are happening, lots of weird things are going to keep on happening. And because the view of this that you get through the media is not particularly well informed, let's say, it's going to be very easy to either make the wrong decisions or stay out of the market and make no decisions through fear because you don't know what the heck's going on. And both of those things are bad.
They are. Something I've said many times on a podcast over the years, and this won't be new to long-time listeners, I don't think the game of money is a fair game. I think the rules, the way they're set, hurt the majority. And it hurts the uninformed. I actually do believe, though, if you understand the rules of the game, then you can take advantage of it and use them to your advantage to increase your wealth. Now, I'd like a system where it wasn't so complicated and people could prosper without understanding these rules. But we are where we are. And this is why doing this podcast is a huge motivation for us, because at least if you understand the rules of money, then you can take advantage of it rather than be punished. But like you said, Rob, and it's absolutely important to understand this, if you choose to do nothing, you will automatically be punished. You have to take action. You have to do something, otherwise you will be punished. Sitting by and going, well, if I sit out this game, then I'll be okay. No, you won't. You will be hurt.
And that leads us nicely into the first way that understanding how money works will transform your life. Because that first point is, it'll motivate you to take action. And the price of inaction is really, really high. So, for example, a stat that I use in the book is that the pound has lost 50% of its value since the year 2000. Now, that's not top secret knowledge. That's not something where I've had to go and bend the fingers back of the Bank of England to get them to reveal that. That's out there. You can go and look that up on countless websites. But no one does. No one thinks about this day to day. Day to day, nothing seems to be really changing. But losing 50% of its value over the last 20 odd years is crazy. So if you find a £20 note in an old wallet that you'd forgotten about or in the back of a drawer and it's been there for 20 years, then that will buy you half of what it would have done in the year 2000, which is just insane. And keeping your money in the bank is not a whole lot better. So for the majority of the time prior to 2008, you would make money by keeping your savings in the bank because the rate that you're earning on your savings was higher than the rate of inflation. So even if you had inflation reducing the value of your pounds, that was being topped back up and then some by the interest you were receiving. So you'd end up ahead. Since 2008, that hasn't been the case. The rate of inflation has always been higher than the rate that you're getting on your savings. And that's still the case now. It doesn't feel like it because you're getting something in the bank now. But even if you're getting 3% in the bank, which is like crazy high compared to what we've been used to recently, well, if inflation is even 7%, which is lower than it is at the time of recording, then you're still losing. And for reasons I talk about in the book, and it's a bit too lengthy to explain now, to kind of develop the argument in the book, it's only going to get worse. This is just going to continue at pace. And like I say, Rob, none of this is top secret information. But when you take the time to sit down and properly understand it and grasp it, the only conclusion you can come to is like, whoa, I've got to do something here.
That's right. It goes back to that point of taking action. So I said earlier, you can either be punished or rewarded. So it's easy to see in this scenario how you're punished. Inflation will erode your wealth. If you put the money under your mattress or in the bank, it will be worth less over time. Saving is a good thing to do, but only to then go on to invest. Saving alone will make you poorer. So they're the people being punished. But I also said earlier, you can be rewarded. You can take advantage of this situation as well. And how do you do it? Well, it's easy. Any debt that you took out in the year 2000 would also be halved. So let's say you had an interest-only mortgage back in the year 2000. So an interest-only mortgage, the amount of debt that you have is the same, but the value of that debt would have been eroded by 50%. So your asset, the property that you would have bought back in 2000, would have paid you a rental return. It would have gone up in value significantly since the year 2000. But the debt that you took to buy that property has been eroded. So you're using the same situation as savers are using, but whereas savers are absolutely getting hammered and their wealth being eroded, you've supercharged your wealth by taking advantage of that very same situation. And that's just one example of why understanding money is so important. But Rob, also understanding money means that you aren't thrown off course as much by others, and particularly politicians and the media. Because if you follow the sound bites of politicians or the headlines of newspaper articles, you will often make wrong decisions if you use them to guide your investment decisions. Lots of people do make decisions based on what they're being fed by these groups. But if you understand money, then you can be a lot more rational about your decisions, and not only rational, but actually take advantage of situations where others are being led the wrong way. But because you understand money, you can make a much better decision.
That's right. That's the second benefit of understanding how money works. You can come to informed opinions. You can come to those opinions yourself after, sure, listening to all the views that are out there, but then make your own decision. And as you've alluded to, you're not going to get that informed opinion by listening to the media or to politicians. Politicians, and this will shock you, do not tell you the full truth about this stuff. So as I explained in the book, a large part of the reason that we have so much inflation right now is that the government printed so much money in 2020 when COVID hit. Jeremy Hunt has had a lot to say about inflation, and Rishi Sunak has pledged to halve it, which is nonsense in itself. But at no point have either of them said, oh yeah, and the reason for this is that we printed loads of money. It just hasn't come up. There's lots of other reasons, and I'm not saying those other reasons aren't a factor, but they just haven't mentioned this at all. And that's because it doesn't suit them to do so. But if you understand the effect that money printing has on factors like inflation and the value of the pound, then when you see that it's happening, you go, oh, hang on a minute, this is probably going to happen in the future. Therefore, I can come to a view about what I should do. And it's really not that complicated. Again, there's a vested interest in making it seem complicated and using lots of fancy words like saying quantitative easing to mean money printing and things like that, just to try and make it sound like something that you can't possibly understand. But as we've said on this podcast so many times over the years, most things are actually pretty simple, and it's actually better to stick to the basics than it is to start overthinking things. And the most successful predictions we've made have been successful because they're just obvious. And we haven't gone beyond that and overcomplicated things. And the great thing about having that basic understanding, which isn't even that hard when you get down to it, is that you can actually make decisions about your own money. I'm not necessarily saying, for example, that you shouldn't use a financial advisor and you should just make all your decisions yourself. But you definitely don't want to be in a position where you just need to blindly trust what a financial advisor tells you. And I think that is the position that most people are in. They either don't really make any financial decisions at all and get hurt that way, or they outsource their financial decisions and don't have the confidence to challenge what they're being told or the decisions that are being made. And for something as important as money, something that you dedicate so much of your life to trying to earn and get your hands on so you can improve your life and improve the lives of your family, it seems like something you should understand and not just have to take other people's word for it. And as I've already said, but I think it's worth repeating, it's actually not that hard. It's not that intimidating. Let's face it, property investment can be a lot of hard work, but it can be fun and it can be very profitable as well. But with our app portfolio, our aim is to keep the fun and to give you exposure to the potential benefits of property investing without having to do any of the work. So to learn more about Portfolio, just go to portfolio.co.uk or search Portfolio on the App Store.
So the first way money will transform your life is it'll motivate you to take action, and the right action. Second, you'll have more informed opinions on how to act. And the third one then is the obvious one. It leads on from both of those, which is that you'll make better investments. As Rob said, a lot of what we've done on our podcast over the years is just common sense. We've understood money and how it works and the way the markets move. And have we got everything right over the years? No. But have we got a lot right and then built some credibility off the back of it? Absolutely. And take it a step further, we've not just had opinions, but we've then made investments. We've put our own money into the areas and the investments that we think will do well. And by understanding money, you'll have a better idea of what the future may look like and how your investments over the long term are positioned and will they do well or not. And when you don't understand money, it can be really difficult to go, oh, right, okay, well, what do I invest in? It's difficult to choose. Whereas when you understand money, you actually have too many options and say, oh, I wish I could invest in all these things right now because there's so many good investments out there. And they're obvious as well. You don't even have to work hard to find them. And it's not just limited to property. That's property, stocks and beyond. You just see things that look obvious and go, okay, well, I'm prepared to make a bold bet or investment on that and go against what others are saying because to me, it's really, really obvious. You see this play out in so many ways. In the property market, when everybody was going on about London and how it's going to be the best thing ever and how you can't invest anywhere else, we were talking about Manchester because it just looked so obvious. And we also felt that London had really pushed on as much as it could. We may have gone a little bit early on London, but we were right about Manchester and we're ultimately right about London as well. It's not because we're super smart. We're not. It's because we understand money. And if you understand money, you can make those bolder bets. Facebook was being hammered by the media. The markets were hammering it. It was a bad news bear. If you Googled anything about Facebook in the last 12 months, there was no good press. But yet, Rob and I both invested in Facebook, and we both saw gains off the back of those investments in Facebook. So the world was saying Facebook's doomed. Yet to us, it was one of the biggest media companies in the world. It still had huge reach. Furthermore, some of the smartest investors in the world were actually going against that consensus and investing in Facebook as well. So it was really easy for us to make that investment, that bet, if you like. And have we got those bets wrong in the past? Yes. But have we got more right than wrong because of our understanding of money? Absolutely.
Yeah, this isn't magic. You're not going to get it right every time. But if you get more right than wrong, then that's good enough. And that's something this knowledge allows you to do. And we've already made this point, but it's worth repeating. That another aspect of making better investments is understanding how to use debt as a tool. Rob explained earlier how inflation would have helped you out over the last 20 years enormously if you'd been using debt as a tool. And the book explains why I believe it's inevitable that that's going to continue being successful in the future because the government is using debt as a tool. The government has more debt than anyone else. If you think you're highly leveraged and maybe taking on a bit too much risk, you should take a look at the government's balance sheet. As a result of rates going up from zero, there are some major problems brewing for governments as a result of the amount of debt that they have and the future cost of that debt. And the only way they can get that under control is to take actions that will also benefit you if you have debt. So I'm not saying go and load yourself up on credit cards and personal loans as much as you can get your hands on, but it is saying that you can use debt as a tool. And that's again where knowledge is so powerful because it's so easy, and most people will be doing this, to look at the fact that interest rates have gone up and go, oh, rates are going up. I need to make it a priority to pay off my debts. I need to become debt free. I need to deleverage. And for some individuals, that will be the right thing to do. But by thinking that way, you could also be missing out on massive opportunities. So you absolutely will make better investments as a result of understanding how money works.
The rules of the game are rigged. All the stuff that you're told in school actually makes you poorer. Get yourself a job and save some money for the long term. Just put your money into savings. You're never really taught to then go on to the next stage, the most important stage, which is invest. And because of that, as we've already explained in just a brief period of time, you'll lose financially over the long term. You're guaranteed to lose. So if you understand the rules of the game, rules that I don't think are fair, but if you understand the rules of the game, then you can take advantage and you can win. And that's why we're so motivated to carry on doing this podcast for the long term, because we want to help as many people as possible. And share this pod, help people understand what is happening, because if they understand even just some of the basic things we've covered today, then they're going to be in a much better place. But you could be in a much better place beyond this and get yourself The Price of Money, Rob's book, or gift it to somebody so they can understand it as well, because it's written in a way that a beginner can pick up and get a grasp of what is happening in the world in a relatively short space of time. For the 15 quid that you'll spend, Rob's not going to be going off to the Caribbean islands anytime soon. The whole point of the book is to help more people to understand what is happening in the world, so more people can take advantage of the situation rather than being punished. So gift that book. Gift it to other people. If there's multiple people who need it, then gift it to multiple people. For that £15, think of what an investment you are making in them. Like £15 is nothing, but the knowledge they will gain will be absolutely incredible. And there is a selfish motivation here as well. Of course, I do want Rob to hit the best-selling lists when it comes to the book launch, and I really hope you do too. So if there is absolutely nobody in your life that will benefit from the book, then fair enough. Please buy it anyway, just to support Rob and the pod, because I think after 10 years in, he deserves that support. I want this book to be a huge success. But Rob, if all that wasn't enough, you're willing to bribe people as well by giving them lots of free stuff to buy your book.
Yeah, if people aren't going to follow your plea, then I'm just going to add as much value as possible. So if you buy the book after next Thursday, the 30th of March, once it's out, you spend about 15 quid and you get a book. It's a book that I spent 3 years on. It's a book I happen to think is pretty good, and lots of other people like it as well. But if you buy the book within the next week before it comes out, so if you pre-order the hardback, then for your £15, you get the book. You also get a 90-minute video course explaining some of the key concepts from the book to help you solidify that knowledge, and you get that instantly. You also get an invite to a series of online events I'm putting together called the Wealth Sessions, which I'm going to be holding at lunchtimes through May, where I'm going to be having conversations about these topics with some of the finest minds in finance. And you get to not just listen in, but you get to ask your questions to them as well. And the lineup for this is pretty ridiculous. So I don't even know if I told you this, Rob. So William Green, the author of Richer, Wiser, Happier, he's doing it. So it's going to be great talking to him. Andrew Craig, the author of How to Own the World, which is one of the best-selling and most popular investment books in the UK. I'll be talking to him, Claire Barrett from the Financial Times, Akil Patel, who is probably one of the 3 leading experts in the world when it comes to the 18-year property cycle, and more as well. You can join me live for all those conversations and get the recordings and get the video course and get the book for 15 quid. Come on, what more can I do?
So whether you want to change people's lives and help them, or help yourself by getting all those amazing bonuses, and they are amazing. I didn't know that full lineup. That is pretty special. Or maybe both. You want to help yourself and others, then go to thepriceofmoney.co.uk, pick up yourself a copy or two, and get yourself those incredible benefits, an incredible book, and pass the knowledge on. In all seriousness, yeah, all those things are amazing, and I'm sure you'll very much enjoy it. And it's pretty easy to argue that that's worth a lot more than the £15 you're being charged. But for me, I just want as many people to read this book as possible and understand the concepts in the book, because the country will be better off for it. But if you can't bring somebody to read the book, hopefully you can get them into this podcast. Like this episode alone, just make them listen to one episode. Just force it on them. Sit them down and say, take the 20 minutes to listen to the main part of this podcast. Because if that sinks in, then it really will help them. So you can go whole hog and get the book. If not, just absorb the lessons here. But fingers crossed, Rob, that your book does everything it deserves to do in the next week or two. I'm rooting for you. I really want it to do well. We, of course, will update you on how it went in the coming weeks.
So that is us done for this week. I hope we've inspired you to go and take the actions that you need to improve your financial life. And as we said earlier, as if a book launch wasn't enough, there's more to come. Next week, we've got something even bigger, so you're not going to want to miss that. So do make sure you join us next Thursday. If someone has passed this podcast on to you, then make sure you subscribe. Hit follow in iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen. And we'll see you back here for that very exciting episode next Thursday. Until then, have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.